Morning found the word rebel already dry on clean tablets. I woke on the same cloak that still smelled of pitch and river and the red field's stubborn stink. The left eye stayed under its strip. Purple had settled into a hard seam that made dawn a set of knives. The right eye did the work of two and charged me interest for every quick turn. Thigh pack stiff, chest pack pulling when I breathed deep, forearm stitch quiet until I made a fist, shin line hot, ribs grating if I twisted to look south too fast. Levels did not close wounds. I had learned that lesson in blood and intended to keep learning it the cheap way, by remembering. I opened the panel once, inventory only. Lucius Varro, level 20, experience 0 of 1590, strength 14, endurance 15, agility 14, vitality 15, intelligence 15, skill echoes, shield hook, battle ready, arrow step, novice, boar brace, practiced, echo slots, 3 of 3. I closed it before the numbers could pretend to be comfort. Cassian's cane slept in soil where the burial ground could see the chain. The fort breathed. South, Gaius's neat rectangle of fires had become a neat rectangle of movement. North, Armin's broken scatter still rebuilt itself like a problem that refused to be solved by one burned wagon park. Rufus met me on the mound steps with Hornlaw already in his mouth. Courier returned before second bread. Gaius did not wait for Senate cousins to finish arguing. He has cut the South Cart Road with polished men and pretty seals. He calls it peacekeeping. He calls cages kindness, I said. How many? A full cohort on paper. On ground, enough shields to stop grain and enough riders to stop messengers who do not smile at his name. Livia arrived with wax under her nails and no patience for theatre. He has already sent copies of the rebel brand toward the next 3 road posts. If those posts believe the ink, our supply becomes a rumor. If they doubt it, he will make doubt expensive. Tiro brought the signum to half height. Cloth moved like a slow thought. Helvius walked the fringe at false dawn. Gaius's men drill with Latin words and keep their scooter clean. They look like us until they look at us. That is the whole sickness, I said. Hanno spat riverward, carefully not south. Ferry stays ours. If Latin steel comes for the pins, I want a horn that means sink, not debate. You will have it, Rufus said. My horn still owns withdrawal and ferry. Temporary operational command in the field remains Lucius's until I strip it. I have not stripped it. Capito managed a chair on the steps, ear stitched, eyes mean with recovery. Civil fight eats forts from the inside. Write rules before blood writes them for you. Navius stood too straight again until I pointed at his dressing. I can take a century south. You can take water and a stool and the right lane's readiness, I said. If I need glory hunger, I will hire a poet. I need intervals. Secundus held the custody book like a second shield. 56 sealed remain sealed. 3 temporary raiders separate. Odo sitting sleep. Baran better color. Still treatment separate. Red Day field bonds outside the main register. Night host bonds still temporary. No clever mergers while ink turns into spears. Keep it that way, I said. Prisoners are not fuel. Not for Gaius, not for me, not for the panel. Sava caught my jaw, turned my face, checked the strip edges. If you open sight because a Roman smiles at you, I will sew the strip to bone. I will keep it shut unless the alternative is dying stupid, I said. Dying stupid is still dying, she said. Cassian hated both. I walked the stake lane and let men see that level 20 still limped when the thigh pack pulled. Soft lies about glowing eagles make soft graves. Hard truth keeps hands on tools. Gaius did not attack the gate at first light. He was smarter and worse. He let hunger begin its slow argument. A southbound cart of barley turned around under polite spears. A mule train with vinegar stopped and paid a road due in seals that did not match any book Livia trusted. 2 of our own outriders came back with bruises and a message. Stand down the farmer. Keep your lives. Keep your names. I gathered the optios under the eave where the chain's tick could still be heard if the wind ran right. Listen once, I said. We will fight Romans if Romans come under arms to seize this fort, this ferry, these people, or the officers who hold them. We will not hunt unarmed clerks for experience. We will not butcher kneeling men to make the panel flash. We will not turn civil steel into a harvest. If a man drops his weapon and stays down, he is a problem for rope and wax, not for a gladius looking for numbers. Silence held. Then Ralla said, "And if they only pretend to kneel, then you will learn the difference between a knee and a coil," I said. Cassian would have beaten that difference into you with a cane. I have less wood and less time. Do not make me use more blood. Tiro's mouth twitched, not a smile, recognition. Livia lifted a tablet. I will write the rule as order, not sermon. Names, witnesses. If Gaius calls us rebels, he will also have to call disciplined rebels. Make his story expensive. Rufus nodded once. Horn signals stay clean. No private glory horns. If the south fringe becomes a battle line, my withdrawal call still empties lanes. Lucius places the field. I keep the fort from becoming two forts. I looked south at the polished rectangle. Civil war does not always begin with a scream. Sometimes it begins with clean boots and a road that suddenly requires permission. Scouts out, I said. Thin blade, no heroes. Bring me ground truth, not courage stories. Eleus took 3 quiet men along the goat line that still remembered shepherds. Helvius took the cart scar with 2 more. I kept the drainage cut in reserve because drainage cuts are where ambushes go to feel clever. While they walked, I checked the medical line, the sealed roofs, the northern boys' separate watch, and the grave edge where 2 fingers on soil still felt like a failed pulse check. Intervals, I told the dirt, because that was the only prayer the cane would have tolerated. Then I went back to living mouths. By mid-morning, the first polished shields showed on the south cart road, not charging, only standing in a way that made barley change its mind. Open war had not yet drawn full steel. It had drawn a line. Lines are where men decide what kind of eagle they are willing to become. I buckled a scutum that was not yet cracked, tasted ash on second bread, and refused the urge to make a speech long enough to become a lie. Places, not speeches, tools that work twice. The day began with Latin enemies learning our names, and with us learning that the hardest fights are the ones that wear your own language. The first blood on the South Road did not wait for a formal declaration. Ilias came back hard-breathing, with dust on his tongue and a cut along his cheek that he ignored like a tax. "Marcus Vel," he said, "centurion marks, clean plume. He has a block on the cart scar where it narrows between 2 drainage ditches. 30 shields, maybe 35. Not the whole cohort. A tooth, teeth bite," I said. "Did he offer terms?" He offered the rebel brand read aloud and a chance to walk south without weapons. He called it mercy. "Mercy with a ditch on both sides is a funnel," Livia said. Rufus's jaw worked. "If we leave that block, grain dies. If we smash it without care, we teach every fence-sitter that we butcher Romans for sport. Then we smash it with care," I said, "under arms. No pursuit into kneeling. No killing the clerks behind the line if they drop tablets instead of blades. I took 2 centuries' worth of legs that could still pretend to be fresh. Capito's left under his optio, while Capito cursed from a chair. Navius's right under a steadier man than Navius currently was, and my own center scraps stiffened by Red Day survivors. Tiro kept the signum. Hanno stayed on pins. Rufus kept the mound horn. Livia kept wax and a runner chain. We did not march like a parade. Parades are for men who want to be seen winning. We moved along the goat line until the cart scar's ditches could not dictate our shape, then cut in from the side where Vel's neat block had to turn or break. Vel turned well. I will give him that. His voice carried Latin the way a good nail carries wood. "Varro, lay down the glow and keep your men alive. Lay down the road and keep your men fed," I answered. "Or fight under arms and stop pretending ink is a shield." He chose arms. Good. The panel stays honest when the enemy chooses. His first push came as a narrow wedge meant to pin us against the ditch lip. Bore brace practiced took the true commit. Hips set, oval planted, no faint tacks wasted on a man who meant the crash. The shock ran up my bad thigh and into the chest pack. Pain reported. I filed it. Shield hook battle ready found his rim, turned it half a hand, and made his second rank stumble into the first's heels. Vel himself was not a rear-rank poet. He stepped into the gap with a gladius that had seen real work and a scutum boss polished like a threat. Strength 14 met him without elegance. Endurance 15 kept my plant from becoming a sway. Agility 14 was only enough to keep arrow step novice from turning into a trip when the ditch edge crumbled under my left heel. He tried to bind my oval high and cut low, the old lesson. I let the bind happen long enough to feel his weight commit, then hooked the bind into his knee angle, the way Cassian had beaten into fools with wood instead of steel. Vel went down hard, still dangerous, still armed. I did not pause to make a speech on the morality of civil blood. I ended the armed threat. Experience gained 2,800. The panel flickered at the edge of vision. I did not open a full inventory mid-fight. Numbers that arrive while men still stand are invitations to die counting. Vel's second, a hard optio with a cracked tooth, tried to hold the block by screaming Vel's name like a spell. Spells fail when the body is gone. Our left lane pushed. Our right lane refused the ditch. Men on both sides cursed in the same language, which made the sound worse than any northern roar. A polished legionary dropped his peeler and raised empty hands. Raller's blade hesitated. Good. Then the man grabbed a fallen gladius again. Hesitation ended. Another went to both knees and stayed empty. Rope came. Wax would come later. The panel did not flash for rope. I wanted it that way. We cleared the cart scar in an ugly quarter hour that felt longer. Dead Romans looked like dead Romans. Living Romans under temporary bonds looked like a future political fire. Secundus would hate the paperwork. Secundus's hate keeps forts honest. I walked the ground once. No looting of personal seals beyond evidence. No stripping the wounded for sport. Water for mouths that could drink without biting. Sava's runner arrived with packs and a glare that asked whether I had reopened the thigh on purpose. On purpose would imply planning, I said. This was necessity with bad footing. Tiro planted the signum where the block had been and did not cheer. Cheering teaches the wrong lesson on a Latin road. Helvius marked the ditches for later stake work. Ilias bound his cheek and pretended it was nothing. Livia arrived as the last rope knot tightened. She looked at Vel's body, then at the kneeling men, then at me. You kept the rule, for now, I said. Rules are easiest after 1 win, hardest after 10. Then we will rewrite them after 10 if we must, she said. Not before, and not because the panel gets hungry. Rufus's runner brought a short horn code. Fort steady, north quiet for now, south smoke only where we had made it. I sent back, road tooth pulled, no pursuit beyond the scar. Return with living problems. On the walk back, I felt the experience sitting in me like a second pulse. 2,800 toward a bar of 15,900. Civil blood paid. I hated that it paid. Hating it did not make me throw the gain away. Throwing gains away is how idealists die and leave worse men holding the horn. At the eve, Secundus already had a new page. Named dead for the book, named living for temporary bonds. No mergers with northern custody. Latin prisoners stay Latin problems. Good, I said. If anyone suggests feeding them to the river to simplify arithmetic, arrest the suggester. Capito, from his chair, barked a laugh that hurt him and pleased him. Farmer learns politics. Farmer learns that politics is just logistics with sharper lying, I said. Gaius would feel the missing tooth by night. He would not apologize. He would send a bigger mouth. That is how polished men answer when the world refuses their first neat paragraph. I cleaned my gladius with sand and water, not with speeches. The blade did not care that the blood had spoken Latin. Tools are cruel that way. Command has to be kinder than tools without becoming softer than survival. By afternoon, the road grew messengers the way a wound grows flies. Gaius sent them under truce cloth and under no cloth, under smiles and under knives. One courier carried a fresh copy of the rebel brand with 3 new cousin seals pressed hard enough to split wax. Another carried a private tablet for Rufus alone. Rufus read it, spit, and handed it to Livia without making me ask. It offers him the fort if he delivers me in chains and keeps temporary command as a reward for good posture, I said after she summarized. Close enough, Rufus said. I told the courier the fort is not a coin. He looked disappointed. Young men love coins that look like honor. The third messenger did not bother with tablets. Quintus Darrow came with a roadblock, Optio's swagger, and 20 riders who called themselves an escort. They stopped short of javelin range and asked for parley as if parley were a leash. I went out with Tiro, 2 scooter, and Livia's runner, not because I trusted theatre, because refusing all talk hands Gaius the story that we fear words. Words are cheaper than funerals when you keep your hands near hilts. Darrow smiled with clean teeth. Lay down, Varro. The North host is the real war. This squabble embarrasses Rome. Then stop squabbling with barley, I said. Open the road. Stand in the line facing Armin. Keep your polished cohort where useful steel belongs. Useful steel belongs where lawful command points, Darrow said. Lawful command points at your wrists. Lawful command does not arrive as a cousin knife while a boar host rebuilds, Livia said. Read our witness names, or do cousins not read? Darrow's smile thinned. He had not come to read. He had come to see if we would flinch hard enough to make chains easy. When talk failed, he tried the escort. Riders on a narrow approach are brave and stupid in the same breath. We had stakes ready because Helvius sleeps less than pride. The first rush broke on wood and pillar angles. Darrow himself drove through the gap like a man who believed momentum was a legal argument. Shield Hook took his passing cut and turned the wrist. He stayed armed and vicious on the ground. I finished the armed argument. Experience gained, 2,900. His riders who could still choose dropped weapons when the second push failed. 2 tried to flee and ride down a medical runner. Those 2 did not get the kneeling mercy. The runner lived. That math I can sleep near. We did not chase the rest into the south fringe. Pursuit into Gaius's full rectangle would have turned a tooth pull into a throat-cutting contest on his chosen dirt. I wanted his dirt to come to me when he was angry enough to be honest. Calt arrived at dusk as honesty with a cloak over it. Severus Calt, courier escort captain, knife man, the sort who delivers letters and leaves bodies as postage. He did not ask for parley. He came along the drainage cut with 12 quiet blades while our eyes were still tasting the rider dust. Arrow Step novice saved my neck by a handspan when the first knife wrote a line where a throat had been. Shin complained. Eye strip pulsed. I did not open sight. Sight is a mouth that drinks light and bleeds for the privilege. Calt wanted me looking at glowing edges while real edges arrived. Boar brace is a poor tool in a knife tangle, but a practiced plant still stops a body check long enough for a hook to find an elbow. Calt was good. Good is not the same as unanswered. He cut my forearm stitch open along the old line and smiled when he saw blood he recognized as success. I hooked his smile into the stake beside us and let the stake finish the grammar. Experience gained, 3,100. The remaining knives broke when their captain stopped teaching. 3 surrendered on empty hands. 1 kept cutting toward Tiro and the Signum. Tiro did not freeze. He moved the cloth like a weapon that happens to be sacred and let Secundus's nearest guard end the cutter. I put a hand on Tiro's shoulder afterward. Brief, solid, no speech. He nodded once. The boy who used to panic had become a man who understood that standards are lungs. Sava re-sewed my forearm with a lecture about idiots who collect matching scars. I accepted the lecture. Pain is tuition. Livia laid the captured tablets in a row under lantern light. 3 hands wrote these seals. 1 hand is Gaius's pretty cousin marks. 1 is a road post we already doubted. 1 is new, and it copies treasury marks the way a thief copies a face from a coin. Armin's stamps again? I asked. or Gaius borrowing Armin's method, she said. Either way, the rebel brand is not only fear, it is a machine for moving food and loyalty. Rufus listened with his arms folded hard enough to creak leather. Open war is no longer a question of manners. It is a question of which Latin throat tries to own the horn. Then we treat Gaius as a hostile command under arms when he acts as one, I said. Not as a cousin having a tantrum. Tantrums do not cut roads, commands do. I checked the panel in a quiet corner, not for greed, for ledger honesty. Experience after Vel, Darrow, and Kaut sat at 8,800 of 15,900. The climb was real. The cost was Latin names in Secundus's book. I closed the panel and washed my hands until the water ran less pink. Night thickened. North drums talked to themselves in Armin's broken scatter. South, Gaius's rectangle tightened into something that wanted to become a fist. Between them, we held iron chain, sealed cloth, and a rule that still forbade turning helplessness into progress. Cassian would have called the rule obvious. Obvious rules are the ones men abandon first when frightened. I told the Optios again anyway, because repetition is how habits outlive fear. Tomorrow he answers the tooth, Capito muttered from his chair. Bring a bigger jaw. Then we bring better angles, I said, and we keep our dead from becoming his proof that we are the monsters he needs us to be. Gaius answered with a Levy speech and a set of wedges that pretended to be rescue. At first light, his polished men advanced not only along the cart scar, but toward the refugee roofs and the outer stake line, calling to our newer centuries with promises. Keep your pay, keep your names, hand over the glowing farmer, receive full pardon under clean seals. Some mouths listened. Listening is not yet betrayal. It is the door betrayal uses. I walked the listening ranks with Tiro and the Signum and Capito's rough Optio. If you want a clean seal more than a living fort, walk south now without weapons, I said. No one will cut your back for choosing fear in daylight. If you stay under horn and cloth and the civil rule. You do not get to stay and sell intervals later. 12 men walked. I hated losing the bodies. I preferred losing them in daylight to losing a lane at night from the inside. Rufus recorded the names without spitting on them. Spitting is cheap. Records are teeth. Bren Hole came behind the speech with a supply seized chief's patience. He was not pretty, he was effective. His maniple cut toward our vinegar carts and the spare scutum stack like a man who understood that battles are won by what you drink and hold after the screaming. We met him among the carts, which is ugly fighting. Wheels, ropes, terrified mules, and no room for elegant manuals. Hull used the ugliness. He drove a mule train into our first rank to break intervals on purpose. Boar brace does not brace a mule, men do. I shouted the only order that mattered. Kill the momentum, not the animal if you can, and do not become a butcher of beasts to feel brave. Hull himself came over a cart bed with a spear shorter than northern fashion and a shield scarred by real use. Eagle sight stayed shut. I did not need purple numbers to know a supply chief who leads from the front is worth more experience than a speech. Shield Hook found his scarred rim. He counted the hook like a man who had drilled against it. Gaius had been collecting my habits. Good. Habits can be traps for the collector too, if you change the second beat. I hooked, released, stepped offline with arrow steps, short lateral, and put the gladius where his commit had emptied a line. Experience gained 3,200. Hole's seas broke when the chief stopped counting carts. We recovered vinegar, lost 2 mules to panic, and gained a row of kneeling Latin supply hands who had never wanted to be heroes. Rope, water, no panel flashes for the kneeling. One of our own tried to kick a kneeling man for sport. I took the kicker's name, his extra ration, and his pride in front of the line. Civil discipline is not a poem. It is a punishment that teaches the living. Titus Cale hit the river ford shoulder an hour later while we were still stacking recovered scooter. Cale was the bigger jaw Capito had predicted, raid leader, wide-chested. wearing a tribune's friendliness like a second helmet. He announced that the ferry would be placed under lawful southern custody for the peace of Rome. Hanno answered by showing him the pins and a face that promised drowning. I took the center of the forward shoulder because if the ferry fell, the fort became a bowl waiting for whichever army arrived less tired. Cale's wedge was Roman correct and therefore predictable if you still believed predictability was comfort. I did not. I used it anyway. Boar brace practiced met his first true commit and held while the thigh pack screamed. Strength 14 felt small against his mass. Endurance 15 kept the plant from becoming a story about almost. When he broke the brace with a second surge, Shield Hook turned his boss and Arrow Step put me out of the spear's favorite line. He adapted fast. Fast is why men get names in books. He fainted high and kicked for my reopened thigh. Intelligent cruelty. I took the kick on the pack edge, lost a breath, kept the oval, and hooked his supporting ankle while his weight was still a liar. He went down armed. Down and armed is still a battle. I ended it before his second rank could make him a banner. Experience gained 3,900. The panel did not ask permission. Level 21 reached. Experience 0 of 17,700. Free strength settled into bone and tendon like a debt paid in reverse. The thigh did not heal. The eye did not clear. The world did not become kind. My shield arm simply hurt less when I forced a rim to turn. I opened the inventory because level thresholds deserve honesty. Lucius Varro, level 21. Experience 0 of 17,700. Strength 15. Endurance 15. Agility 14. Vitality 15. Intelligence 15. Skill echoes. Shield hook. Battle ready. Arrow step. Novice. Boar brace. Practiced. Echo slots. 3 of 3. I closed it and went back to the forward shoulder before anyone could turn a number into a miracle story. Cale's raid left wounded and a scatter of dropped seals. Livia claimed the seals. Hanno claimed the shoulder with fresh stakes and a stream of river curses. Rufus claimed the narrative in a short horn pattern that meant held, not triumphant. Triumphant horns start stupid pursuits. Among Cale's living was a young signaller who had wet himself and still held empty hands high. Tiro looked at him too long. I knew that look, memory of being small in a big terror. Bond him temporary, I said. Water, no speeches about courage. Courage can wait until his bladder forgives him. By second bread, the South Fringe had learned we would fight for road, supply, and ferry without turning the fight into a massacre parade. Gaius would hate that lesson. Men like Gaius need their enemies to look monstrous so their own knives look clean. I stood at the burial edge long enough to say the new level without pride. Strength 15, I told the soil. Still not enough to lift a dead voice back. The soil did not argue. Soil is older than panels. Then Livia found me with a different kind of blade. Names of road posts that had accepted Gaius's brand and names that had burned it. The war is paper and spears both, she said. If you only answer spears, paper will strangle you while you sleep. Then we answer both, I said. You own paper. I own the intervals that keep paper writers alive. She almost smiled. Almost is enough in a week like this. Between fights, the fort became a school for what civil war is allowed to mean. I ordered a full water count before any victory wine could invent itself. Skins, cistern, river access under watch. Vinegar as cleaning, not courage. Hanno walked the ferry pins twice and made me walk them once so my hands remembered cold iron. If Gaius takes the chain, he takes the map, Hanno said. If Armin takes the chain, he takes the throat. Same pins, different teeth. Same answer, I said, hold. Livia set up a second tablet table under the eave and called it the civil desk without smiling. Witness copies of the rebel brand, lists of road posts, names of men who walked south at dawn, names of men who stayed, seals from Hole and Cale, a separate board for rumors that had not yet earned the dignity of ink. You will not like parts of this, she told me. I already do not like the weak, I said. Gaius is circulating a story that your system feeds on Roman deaths specifically, she said. That every Latin corpse is a rung. If frightened men believe it, they will kill you to save their own souls, or they will kill prisoners to starve your panel on purpose. Then we publish the rule louder, I said. Meaningful participation against hostile opponents under arms. No experience from executions. No experience from helpless men. No experience from allies. Cassian's death already proved the last. I will not let Gaius write a different machine over the real one. She watched my face. Can you prove a negative to a crowd? I can prove behavior, I said. Rope instead of spectacle. Living bonds instead of ditches full of convenience. If the panel stays dark when a man kneels, enough eyes will notice. We tested it that afternoon without arranging theatre. A captured rider from Daro's scatter tried to bait a young recruit into killing him by spitting and calling the recruit a traitor. The recruit looked at me. I looked at the rope. The recruit chose rope. The panel did not flicker. Men nearby saw the non-event and did not know they had seen a foundation stone. Foundations are often non-events. Secundus hated the growing Latin temporary bonds. Hate is his love language for order. Northern sealed stay sealed. Latin temporary stay temporary and separate. If anyone suggests a combined pen for simplicity, I will simplify their duties into latrine stone. Do it, I said. Simplicity is how massacres learn to walk. Sava forced me onto a stool and rebuilt the thigh pack, the chest wrap, and the forearm stitch Count had insulted. Strength 15 does not knit flesh, she said. I know. Say it again while looking at the signum, so the men hear the system is not a priest. I looked at the signum and said it. Tiro pretended not to be proud. Pride in truth is allowed. Capito practiced standing for 20 breaths and sat before he fell. Progress. Navius slept a true sleep for the first time since the Red Field and woke angry that the world had continued without his supervision. Also progress. I drilled shield hook on a post until the battle-ready motion stopped feeling like grief wearing gloves. Boar brace against a held cartwheel until the practiced plant remembered it could be calm. Arrow step in short lines between stakes, novice, and limited. Shin complaining, useful anyway. No new echo. Slots full. I felt the fullness like a closed fist. Something worse was coming that would demand a choice. Rufus called a command circle at the 4th hour. Mound officers, ferry hands, medical lead, cloth, wax, custody. No polished guests. North remains a host, Rufus said. Do not fall in love with the southern knife and forget the northern spear. Gaius wants exactly that love affair. Agreed, I said. We answer Gaius hard enough to keep the fort able to face Armin. We do not chase Gaius into a duel of egos across half of Italy while silver boars rebuild. Ilias reported Armin's fires still broken scatter, farther from the burned park, not closer. Reassessment, not retreat, he said. Pony strings thicker on the east loop. They are learning our night paths. Let them learn the ones we can afford, I said. Change the ones we cannot. A runner from a friendly road post arrived with cracked lips and a story. Gaius's men had seized a granary village under peace seals and hanged a local clerk who refused to recopy the rebel brand. Not battle, message. Livia's face went still in the way that means violence has entered the ledger of law. He is building obedience with necks. Then necks become our business when they are used as tools against the living road, I said. Still no hanging of his kneelers in reply. We are not going to win by becoming his reflection with better excuses. Helvius muttered, reflections are faster. Faster to the grave and to the story he wants, I said. Cassian did not die at a gate so I could become efficient at the wrong things. That night I walked the stake lane alone for a stretch, listening to Latin and Northern Dark both. The panel stayed closed. Experience sat at 0 of 17,700 after the level threshold, a clean empty that felt like a held breath. Strength 15 made the scutum rim lighter and did not make command lighter. Command is not a stat. Tiro found me and did not ask if I was well. He said, the 12 who walked south, 2 already tried to walk back. Rufus turned them to temporary labor under watch, not inside the fighting sentries. Good, I said. Fear can reverse. Treachery needs a longer ladder back. And Gaius, Tiro asked. Gaius will stop sending teeth and start sending jaws that talk about destiny, I said. When he does, keep the cloth high and your feet boring. Tiro almost smiled. Boring feet, Cassian's hymn. Sing it, I said. I slept in pieces. In one piece, I dreamed of clean ink turning into spears. In another, I dreamed of the cane tapping my ankle because my interval had drifted. I woke to a real tap, Sava's boot, and a real report, polished leather in the drainage cut again. Quieter than cult, more patient. Night knives were not finished. Civil war rarely finishes a method that almost worked. They came in polished leather because polished leather looks like discipline in the dark. Aulus Pet led the first wedge of night killers, not a full maniple, a chosen cut of men who could move without rattling like cooks. Their job was simple enough to be evil. Reach the signum, cut the cloth hand, cut me if convenient, leave the fort arguing with itself until dawn made every shadow a traitor. Tiro was not sleeping at the signum. He had learned. The first polished shape that rose from the drainage lip met a cloth edge used as warning and a guard's peeler used as fact. Noise did what noise should. Men woke ugly and useful. I hit the lane with oval and gladius and no time for pretty infantry. Pet was already inside the second stake row, shield tight, eyes measuring the mound path. He fought like Gaius's favorite lesson, clean angles, no wasted breath, contempt filed into technique. Boar brace met his short charge between stakes where a full brace barely fit. Practice still matters in cramped dirt. The plant held, my bad ribs grated. Pet hooked my oval with a rim trick that was almost my own shield hook worn by a thief. Almost is a teacher. I let his steel commit, then shortened my hook into his fingers against his own boss. Bone said something honest. He did not drop the shield. Respect for that. I still had to end him while he remained an armed hole in our lane. Experience gained 3,300. Pet's cutters tried to become smoke when the chief fell. Smoke still cuts if you let it leave with trophies. We did not. 2 escaped over the outer ditch. The rest met rope or steel according to their hands. 1 man dropped a blade and then reached for a hidden pugio at a medic's belt. Hidden blades rewrite mercy. The medic lived, the reacher did not. The panel paid nothing for the second man who had already been kneeling when a different fool tried to use him as cover. That fool's death was the armed problem. I made sure Secundus wrote the distinction. Distinctions are how you avoid becoming a machine that only counts bodies. Drusus Fen arrived as the second beat because Gaius also understands music. Fen was knight knife officer by trade and rumor, the kind of Roman who believes silence is a citizenship. He did not aim at the signum. He aimed at the medical eve and at Livia's tablet table. Cut the witnesses, cut the hands that make rebel expensive. I saw the angle late because the left eye still lied about width. Arrow step yanked me sideways off a thrown blade, shin fire. I kept the step small. Novice is not a dance. It is a refusal to be where the enemy paid for you to be. Fen fought low and dirty and professional. Shield work less, knife lines more. Boar brace was the wrong hymn and I sang it anyway when he tried to body me into a post, then switched to hook when his knife hand overextended on a feint that had worked on better men than me in cleaner years. Strength 15 made the bind hurt him more than it hurt me. Endurance 15 kept my breath from becoming a confession. He cut the chest pack open along a seam and laughed once, soft. I hated the laugh more than the cut. I put him down before the laugh could become a story he would enjoy in whatever underworld polished men imagine for themselves. Experience gained 3,500. Livia was alive. 2 of her runners were not. She closed their eyes with fingers that did not shake until after, then shook once where only wax could see. He is targeting the desk, she said. Then the desk grows guards who understand ink is a weapon, I said. You do not become less necessary. You become harder to reach. Rufus arrived with a cloak over bare legs and a face like a closed gate. Night work means he has stopped pretending this is a legal disagreement. He stopped when he cut the barley, I said. This is only the honest turn of the same letter. Letters can kill when men stop pretending they are only paper. We swept the drainage cut until dawn grayed the edges, found a cache of truce cloths folded beside garrotes, found a small vial Sava sniffed and named Sleep Heavy, found a scrap map of our eve posts with Livia's table marked twice. They mean to try again, Tiro said. They mean to make us move her, I said, or to make me cage her for safety until she cannot work. Both serve Gaius. Livia heard that and lifted her chin. I will move on a schedule I choose, with guards I accept, and I will not be stored like a vase. If I die at a desk, it will be a desk doing damage to him. Rufus looked at me. I nodded. Accepted. Harder perimeter. No vase talk. Work continues. Sava restitched the chest seam and told me if I tore it again, she would staple the pack to my pride. I believed her. At first full light, I allowed myself the panel. After Pet and Fen, experience sat at 6,800 of 17,700. Climbing on Roman blood still tasted like iron pennies. I did not spit the pennies out. I also did not call them sweet. Capito, standing longer now, said, "Night knives mean the next day is open steel. Men who fail in the dark get loud in the sun." Then we prepare loud, I said. Wedges, intervals, no chasing banners into his prepared ground. Make him spend polish on our stakes. Helvius grinned without joy. Stakes love polish. They stain it. I walked to Cassian's soil and did not speak destiny. I spoke the night's tally. 2 officers down, desk still alive, signum still up, rule still holding where hands stayed honest. Still not enough, I said, but not nothing. North drums answered the dawn as if bored by our Latin quarrel. That boredom was a threat. Armin could afford to watch Romans cut Romans if the cutting went on long enough. Our job was to end Gaius's cutting before the champion decided the fort had tenderized itself. Open steel came under a noon sun that made every scutum boss a small, cruel star. Gaius did not come himself. He sent jaws that talked about destiny with other men's mouths. Gnaeus' soul brought a levy breaker captain's confidence and 3 wedges dressed in cousin seals and correct Roman anger. Publius Mare brought the second wedge line with a voice like a court reader and a gladius that had no interest in courts. They formed on the south flat where the ground favored a textbook advance, the kind of ground officers choose when they want the story to look inevitable later. Rufus held the fort lip. I took the field under temporary operational command, with cloth high and intervals boring enough to survive first contact. Capito's left, still more optio than Capito, held the ditch shoulder. Navius's right, Navius standing now with teeth clenched, held the cart scar hinge. Center was mine, red day stubbornness, ferry hands who could leave the pins for a crisis, and men who had learned that glowing farmers still bleed. Sol's first wedge hit like a lecture delivered with shoulders. Bore brace practiced took the true commit across our front center. The shock traveled. Men grunted the same Latin pain words on both sides. I hated the sameness and used it. Sameness means you can predict the second shove. Shield hook battle ready worked the rims where Sol's front tried to climb ours. Strength 15 made the turns meaner. A polished face opposite me looked like a man I might have shared watered wine with in another year. He remained under arms. Under arms is the line. Sol himself drove toward the signum because Gaius's officers have all been taught that cloth is a heart. Tiro moved the heart on command, not on panic. Sol followed the cloth a half step too greedily. I met him in that greed. He was good. Level something I refused to paint in purple. Eagle sight stayed shut behind flesh and choice. Sol feinted brace break low, then high, then tried a cousin of arrow step that almost worked. Almost. My novice step was uglier and closer to the ground. I hooked his oval into Mer's neighboring shield and made their own discipline trip them. Sol stayed dangerous on one knee. I did not confuse knee with surrender, while the gladius remained tight in his fist. I ended the armed threat. Experience gained 3,600. Mer did not break when Sol fell. Mer tightened. Court reader voice became a blade cadence. His second wedge tried to peel Navius's hinge by offering gaps that looked like opportunities and were funnels. Navius almost took the first funnel. I saw his shoulders start the mistake. "Hold boring," I shouted, Cassian's hymn with my throat. Navius held. The funnel closed on empty air, and Myrrh had to spend real men instead of clever dirt. Myrrh came for me when clever dirt failed. Personal, offended, still professional. He fought like a man writing a complaint with steel. I answered with less literature and more hook. He cut my shin along the old line. I paid the tuition and put him down before he could file a second copy. Experience gained, 3,700. The wedges loosened into ugly clusters. That is the moment civil fights become massacres if commanders get drunk on momentum. I called the halt horns early. Our pattern, not Rufus's full withdrawal, a field stop that means freeze and bind. Men on both sides wanted one more cut. I walked the freeze line with the signum and a voice that promised punishment for one more done to empty hands. 3 of ours earned names in the punishment book that evening. One of Gaius's tried to use the freeze to stab a binder and earned a grave. The difference was written where men could hear it. Kneeling Latin fighters went to temporary bonds under Secundus's separating glare. Wounded went to Sava if they could be moved without murdering our own capacity. Dead went into a count that did not pretend they were northern raiders. Livia would need those names when the War of Tablets continued. I did not open the panel on the field. I felt the climb anyway. 10,400 after Sol, 14,100 after Myrrh, still under 17,700. Not yet a threshold. Thresholds do not care about noon heat or moral nausea. Rufus sent a runner. North scouts still report reassessment, not advance. Finish the southern knife without becoming a southern campaign, the runner repeated. Tell Rufus the field stops where the fort still has a north face, I said. Gaius's remaining line withdrew in good order toward the polished rectangle, carrying their wounded and their fury. Good order is dangerous. It means they will return with corrections. I found a boy from Sol's Levy sitting on empty hands, shaking. He could not have been much older than my first conscript weeks. "Why did you come?" I asked. "Pay," he said, "and they said you eat Roman souls." "I eat bread," I said, "sometimes ash-tasting. Your soul is your problem. Your weapon on the ground is why you are breathing. Keep it that way." I left him to rope and water. The panel stayed dark for him. A few of our men noticed. One spat and muttered that mercy was a luxury. I took his extra oil ration for a week and made him carry water to Latin wounded under guard. Luxury is a word frightened hard men use when they want permission to become simple. At dusk, Livia showed me a captured order from Myrrh's belt pouch. Seize the outer works if the field wedges fail. Take living officers if possible. Take the woman of Tablets either way. Either way, Livia read again, voice flat. Then either way fails, I said. I walked the medical line after the noon wedges and let men see that level 21 still sat when Sava pointed at a stool. A recruit asked whether fighting Romans paid the panel the same as fighting northern spears. I told him the panel paid meaningful hostile defeat under arms and stayed dark for kneeling mouths, and that if he killed a bound man to chase a flicker, I would make him a lesson without needing numbers. He looked older when I left. Good. Soft hunger makes soft graves and hard war crimes. Secundus made me sign the Latin temporary bond page twice. Once for the book, he said. Once for your conscience when someone later claims you ordered a ditch. I will sign a third time if it keeps a ditch empty, I said. Capito, from his recovering height, watched the south fringe tighten into a rectangle that wanted to become a fist again. He will not forgive Sol and Myrrh, Capito said. Men like Gaius treat dead officers as unpaid invoices. Then he can invoice me in person, I said. I am tired of his cousin's handwriting doing the stabbing. but night was already walking toward the outer stakes with Gaius's corrections in its mouth, and I could feel the next named jaw loading itself against our gate of our own making. Decimus Ra came for the outer works like a man collecting a debt written in other people's courage. He did not waste spears on the main gate's teeth. He hit the secondary stake yard where the refugee roofs met the working lane, the soft seam every fort pretends is temporary until temporary becomes home. His men carried hooks for stakes, wet hides against fire, and a battering beam cut from a cart axle. Roman solutions, ugly ones. I had placed Orso and a thin blade there because Orso complains correctly. Complaint is a censor. When Orso's runner arrived with a split lip and the words "beam on the seam," we were already moving. The fight among stakes is a close, hating thing. No clean wedges, no court voices, just men trying to unmake a boundary faster than other men can remake it. Ra led from the beam, which earned him my attention and my respect and my intent to end him. Boar brace is hard when the ground is rope ends and dropped tools. I used it anyway on the first surge through a pooled stake gap. Practiced plant, oval into bodies, no feint. The beam nose hit my scutum and drove me back 2 steps that my thigh collected as interest. Strength 15 shoved the nose offline. Shield hook found a helmet rim and made a man become an obstacle to his own team. Ra adapted, sent a cutter team under the beam while we faced the weight. Arrow step took me off the cutter's first line. The second cutter learned that novice still works when the alternative is bowel. I did not chase beyond the gap. Chasing through your own broken stakes is how you donate your back to the next hook. Ra himself came once the beam wedged open a man-wide insult in our line. He fought with a centurion's economy and a looter's timing. Wait for breath, strike on breath. I gave him a false breath on purpose, short, the kind exhausted men show. He took it. Hook punished the take. He still cut my chest pack's fresh seam and grinned through blood on his teeth. Rebel, he said, as if the word were a whetstone. Under arms, I said, and finished the argument before the word could become a chant. Experience gained 3,600. The panel hit threshold without waiting for my feelings. Level 22 reached. Experience 0 of 19,600. Free endurance rolled through me like a second spine deciding to stay. The chest cut did not close. The eye did not forgive. My lungs simply agreed to keep feeding a body that had no right to still be bargaining. Inventory forced honest between shouted orders. Lucius Varro, level 22. Experience 0 of 19,600. Strength 15, endurance 16, agility 14, vitality 15, intelligence 15. Skill echoes, shield hook, battle ready. Arrow step, novice. Boar brace, practiced. Echo slots, 3 of 3. Hold the seam, I shouted, and the shout carried farther than level 21's had. Endurance is not only lungs, it is the refusal to let a line hear you break. We pushed the beam back out of the insult and restaked with anything that could stand. Wagon tongues, broken peeler shafts, a bench from a refugee roof offered by the freed mother with the infant on her hip and murder in her eyes. Civilians who stake their own seam fight different. I put 2 guards on her roof, not as prison, as honor with teeth. Ray's remaining force tried a second surge, then broke when the beam became our trophy and their ladder became our firewood. Kneelers got rope. Runners who kept blades while running got pursuit only to the outer ditch, then stop. I enforced the stop by being there. Gladius red, voice ugly. 2 of ours who did not hear the stop lost a week of meat and gained latrine stone under Secundus. They will hear next time or leave my centuries. Rufus arrived as the seam stabilized, surveyed the insult, and did not waste praise. Outer works held, cost, named dead on both sides. Ray down, endurance 16. Chest pack needs Sava again. Morale brittle in the way that means we won a door and not a war. Gaius will come for a throat next, Rufus said. Doors annoy him, throats comfort him. Livia's runner found us with face grey. They took 2 desk guards on the south path while the seam burned attention. Not Livia, the pathmen. One left alive to speak. Speak what? I asked. That the woman of tablets will be judged at dawn under clean seals for rebel aid, public, as law. The fort's noise fell away from my hearing for a breath. Endurance 16 kept my knees honest. Intelligence 15 laid out the trap in clean lines. Force me to spend the fort's heart on a rescue ground of Gaius's choosing, or force me to abandon Livia and teach every witness that ink alleys are disposable, or force a reckless sight-lit charge into prepared knives. Tiro said quietly, "We are going. We are going smart," I said. Smart is not slow. Smart is not blind. Smart is not a massacre that proves his story. I called the thin blade, the best boring feat, Cloth Sava's toughest medic pair, and Helvius for stakes in reverse, things that open instead of close. Rufus hated releasing me from the fort again. He released me anyway because some losses cannot be absorbed as numbers. "Bring her back," Rufus said. "Bring yourself back. If you must choose, choose the living fort's future over your guilt." "I intend to choose both by refusing his scripted ground," I said, then corrected the word in my mouth, his prepared ground. Cassian's soil got 2 fingers and no speech. Speeches were for men who still thought language could replace a rival. Night carried us south along a path that was not the path Gaius's living messenger had described. Liars teach you which road to avoid. We took goat line and drainage and a cart scar that Ilias swore only shepherds and fools used. We were both. Ahead, polished fires waited in a judgment rectangle. Somewhere inside that neat light, clean seals were being warmed for a neck I needed in the world. I checked my echoes the way a carpenter checks chisels, hook, step, brace. 3 slots full, no room for whatever ugly pattern Gaius would teach me if I let him live long enough to become a lesson. I did not yet know the lesson's name. I only knew the fort's civil desk would not hang at dawn while I still owned Gladius and a debt to every witness name on her tablets. Gaius had built his judgment ground on a low rise where every approach looked like guilt. Truce cloths hung on poles like a skin of law stretched over a drum. Beneath them, a table of seals, a block that had been a butcher's bench before it was promoted, and Livia bound upright to a post with ink still under her nails. Not gagged. Gaius wanted her voice if it broke. He wanted witnesses to hear a tablet woman beg so the story would travel with a prettier moral. She did not look broken. She looked like arithmetic planning a murder. Around the rise, Flavius Cor's ritual guard stood in a double ring, picked men, polished, nervous in the way of soldiers asked to be priests. Behind them, more of the cohort in neat night order. Not the whole South Force. Enough. I did not walk up the road of poles. That road was a throat. We cut from the goat shadow with Helvius's reverse stakes, hooks for their truce poles, wet cloth for their lanterns, a sudden ugly dark where law theatre needs light. Cor reacted well. Ritual guard captains who survive first surprise are worth the pain they cost. He pulled a cordon tight around the block and table, shouting about sacrilege as if hanging a living woman under fake seals were a hymn. "Under arms," I yelled to my thin blade. "Only under arms. Empty hands live." The first crash was Roman on Roman, and therefore worse than Northern Night. Men recognized helmet shapes and cut anyway. Cor came for me with a long cavalry spather that did not care about my scutum manual. Boar Brace took the first heavy line and shuddered. Endurance 16 kept the shudder from becoming a fall. Shield Hook dragged his spather wide off the second cut. He knee-struck my thigh pack with professional hatred. I saw white. I stayed. Cor tried to force me into a lantern pool where his ring could bury me in correct angles. Arrow Step took one ugly lateral out of the pool. Shin screamed. I hooked his knee on the recovery and put him down while his spather still made him an armed problem. Experience gained 3,900. The ring stuttered, not broken, stuttered. Tiro's cloth flicked in the dark where I had told him to keep it visible to us and confusing to them. Livia's eyes found me once. She mouthed a word I knew from her tablets, seals. Septimus Val hit us from the left as Cor fell. Gaius's bodyguard captain, wider than fashion, quieter than his size. He had been waiting for the glow farmer to commit to the center. Smart. I had committed anyway because Livia was on a post and some commitments are not optional. Val fought like a door that had learned to walk. Every step closed space. Every cut assumed I wanted to live more than I wanted the next foot of dirt. He was right and wrong. I wanted the dirt between him and the post. Shield Hook scraped sparks from his boss. He answered with a bind that nearly took my gladius. Strength 15 held the iron. He headbutted the eye strip, purple flowered behind the cloth. For a sick instant, I almost opened sight out of reflex, out of the old stupid hunger to know his numbers. Armin's lesson and Cassian's cane both hit me harder than Val had. I kept the sight shut and fought the man, not the panel. Val overcommitted when he thought the headbutt had bought my blindness. Partially blinded is not the same as gifted to you. I stepped with what arrow step I had left in the shin and hooked his overcommitted shield edge into his own throat line hard enough to make armor fail its job. Experience gained, 4,300. Experience after Cor and Val sat somewhere in the 8,000s of 19,600. I did not open full math mid-slaughter. The climb could wait, the post could not. We punched a seam to Livia. A ritual guard with empty hands dropped and crawled, rope later. Another raised a blade toward her throat as insurance. Helvius put a piler through that insurance. I reached the post, cut lever, and felt her weight come onto her own feet like a decision. Table, she rasped. Seals, orders. Do not leave him the law toys. Tiro and a runner stripped the table under guard, while I turned us into a withdrawal shape rather than a victory parade. Gaius still had not shown his own body. That absence was a finger pointing at a second stage. Move, I ordered. Goat line. No chasing into neat dark. We moved. Gaius's remaining cordon tried to pin us against the rise's reverse slope. Manius Toll, execution ground commander, the man who had warmed the seals and smiled at the block, led that pin with a kind of clerical ferocity. He wanted the woman back on the post more than he wanted my head. Priorities reveal men. Toll fought with a short blade and a hooked pole meant for controlling prisoners. The pole caught my scutum and nearly yanked me into a knee. Boar brace planted me ugly and solid. I let the pole have a piece of rim and gave him shield hook in exchange through his guard. He was still under arms when he fell. I did not pause for theatre. Experience gained, 4,700. That put the climb near 12,900 of 19,600 if my internal ledger still worked under blood. Close enough to smell the next threshold and still short. Livia ran with us, wrists raw, breath sharp, tablets and seals shoved into a sack a runner held like a second heart. He planned a ritual after the hanging, she said between strides. Not only law, something about binding your glow to cousin blood. I heard the priests arguing about bowls. Priests, I said, and hated the word in a Roman mouth tonight. Behind us, a horn that was not Rufus's and not Armin's sounded a pattern I had not heard from Gaius before. Processional, almost sacred, completely wrong on a military night. The judgment rise lit again with fresh lanterns carried in a careful circle. Gaius had arrived to do something stupider and more dangerous than hanging. I wanted to keep withdrawing. Intelligence 15 listed the virtues of not turning around. Loyalty, debt, and the knowledge that a ritual aimed at the eagle system would not stop at one fort listed the virtues of turning around carefully. Thin blade with me, I said. Rest to the fort with Livia and the seals. Tiro, cloth with Livia until the mound. Then find me if the night still has a mouth. Livia grabbed my forearm hard enough to remind the stitch of Calt. If you die for curiosity, I will invent a law that finds your corpse. Not curiosity, I said. Countermeasure. He does not get to write a leash on what I am and hang it on a post next. She cursed me with precision and ran on toward goat dark and living walls. I turned back toward the processional horn with a scutum that had begun to split, a body held together by Sava's stubborn thread, and 3 echoes that suddenly felt like too few tools for a man who called himself general without a title. Gaius Septem stood inside a circle of bowls like a man who had finally stopped pretending he only wanted my wrists. The judgment rise had been cleared of ordinary soldiers out to a respectful ring. Lanterns, polished shields facing outward, a few nervous men in clean fringes who wanted to be priests and did not know how to stand like soldiers. On the butcher block table lay not Livia, but a set of iron pins, a shallow dish of dark liquid, and a scrap of cloth cut in a crude eagle shape that insulted every real standard I had bled under. Gaius wore armor that had never met a ditch and a smile that had met too many rooms. "Varro," he called, almost fond, "you rescued your clerk, touching. Now rescue Rome from the accident of you. Send your cohort north against Armin," I said from outside the circle. "Stop hanging law on benches. Stop cutting barley. Stop writing rebel on living forts that hold the river." "I am writing order," Gaius said. "You are a tool that learned to talk. Tools go back into cases, or they are melted." He lifted a pin. The fringe men began a chant that wanted to be old and was only loud. The dark liquid smelled like iron, wine, and something sweet that did not belong in either. I felt the system flinch, not words, not a full panel, a pressure behind the eyes, a wrong pull along the paths where eagle sight usually burned when I opened it. The ritual was not theater only. It was a hand feeling for a leash ring that might not exist and trying to rivet one in place anyway. "You cannot own what you do not understand," I said. "I can own the man who carries it," Gaius answered. "And if the carry piece comes free, even better, kneel, or I will have the ring cut you out of the story in pieces." The outward shields tightened. This was no longer a cousin's legal play. This was open war under arms with perfume on it. "Break the circle," I told the thin blade. "Only those who fight. Leave the empty-handed fringe if they drop bowls and run." We hit the ring. Polished shields are still wood and leather when a practiced brace arrives with men who believe in boring feet. The first segment buckled. A fringe man dropped his bowl and fled. The panel stayed dark for his back. Another drew a blade from under linen and made himself my business. I hooked him down and did not chase the runners. Gaius did not flee. Credit for that, if credit is the right word. He stepped out of the bowls as the chant broke, put on a helmet with his own hands, and raised a gladius that finally looked like it expected blood. The failed ritual's pressure snapped loose with a nauseating twang behind my left eye. Purple surged. I still did not open sight. If the leash hand had been feeling for an open eye, it could keep feeling through cloth and refusal. "Under arms," I said, mostly to myself, to the rule, to Cassian's absence, now. Gaius was better than I wanted him to be. Not Armin, not a northern spear lord, a Roman trained by money, tutors, and enough real drills to make arrogance lethal. He used the slope. He used lantern glare on my eye strip. He used words between cuts, farmer, rebel, Cassian's fault for dying cheap, to see if language could open a seam steel could not. The Cassian line almost worked. Grief is a hinge. I shut it by planting boar brace into his first true commit and letting endurance 16 eat the shock. Shield hook turned his second. He caught the hook with a counterbind he had clearly practiced against my reputation. Smart thieves study locks. I changed the third beat. Instead of finishing the hook high, I shortened into his knee and used strength 15 to make the polished greave become a problem for his balance. He staggered, laughed, cut my forearm open again on the old stitch, and tried to drive me into a still upright bowl stand. Arrow step took me offline. The bowl stand cracked under his miss. Dark liquid splashed and stank. The fringe chant died completely. Somewhere a polished soldier vomited from nerves. Civil war smells like fear trying to wear incense. Gaius reset behind a scutum offered by a bodyguard who then had the sense to step back. "You cannot kill me without killing Rome's patience," he said. "Rome's patience should have arrived as grain and honest seals," I said. "It arrived as a block. You chose the tools." He came again, faster, less speech, good. I answered with less speech too. Hook, plant, step, hook. My split scutum finally shed a chunk of rim. I kept the core. He cut for the gap. I let the cut score the chest pack and used the pain as a timer for his extension. When his arm was longest, shield hook battle ready took the elbow line, and my gladius ended the tribune who had tried to case a man like a tool. Experience gained, 6,700. The panel broke open on its own threshold, raw. Level 23 reached. Experience, 0 of 21,600. Free agility threaded into hips and feet like a quiet recalibration. Wounds remained wounds. The world remained the world. My next step simply arrived where I meant it with less argument from tired tendons. Gaius lay under arms no longer. The bowls were a joke of pottery and ambition. The crude cloth eagle had fallen in the dark liquid and looked like what it was, an insult. Then the system, cruel and precise, offered the thing it offers when a hostile pattern dies under your hands. Skill echo available. Command cut, novice. A ruthless formation breaking order pattern, compatible with Roman command voice and line control. Warning, endangers allied front ranks if misused. Capture requires an open echo slot. Slots 3 of 3. I stood in lantern smoke with Gaius cooling at my feet and felt the old sick knowledge of dismissal. Arrow step had saved my neck and shin and lateral life for a long hard stretch of fighting. It was still only novice. Command cut was a blade that could break wedges, including my own if I got drunk on it. Calm focus is a lie on a battlefield, but the system accepts a hard pause if you force one. I forced one. I dismissed arrow step. Memory nausea hit like a bilge wave. For a few breaths, every lateral twitch felt wrong, as if my ankles had forgotten a language. Temporary clumsiness in that movement family, exactly as promised. I swallowed bile and accepted the capture before the offer could rot into regret without payoff. Skill echo captured, command cut, novice. Echo slots 3 of 3. Active, shield hook, battle ready. Bore brace practiced, command cut, novice. Inventory, full and necessary. Lucius Varro, level 23. Experience 0 of 21,600. Strength 15, Endurance 16, Agility 15, Vitality 15, Intelligence 15. Skill echoes, shield hook, battle ready. Bore brace practiced, command cut, novice. Echo slots 3 of 3. I closed the panel. Around me, polished men were choosing knees or last cuts. Last cuts died, knees got rope. I did not use command cut on a broken ring of half-surrendered Romans. The warning about allied front ranks was also a warning about the kind of man I could become in one loud order. Gaius' septum is done, I said, loud enough for the ring and the runners. His seals are suspect, his ritual is ash. Living men who drop steel live long enough for tablets. That is the civil rule. Hold it or walk away from my command without weapons. Some walked, more knelt. A few cursed and kept blades and were ended as armed problems. The panel did not turn the cleanup into a feast. I kept it that way by ending cleanup quickly and moving the living. Tiro found me as the rise quieted. Cloth with him after all. Livia's release already reported toward the fort by faster feet. He looked at Gaius, then at me, then at the vomit stink bowls. Did it work, his leash? No, I said. It failed. He died under arms trying to own what he could not read. Remember that sentence. Men will try to rewrite it by morning. Sava would have hit me for the reopened cuts. Sava was not here. I bound what I could, left Gaius's body for a proper count rather than a desecration, and started the living back toward a fort that still had a north face and a river's iron. Civil blood had paid the panel. I carried the payment like a hot coal and did not pretend it was a hearth.
dawn on the mound did not feel like victory. It felt like paperwork with graves attached. We came back with Livia alive, seals in a sack, Latin temporary bonds in a miserable column, and a dead tribune on a litter under a cloak, because even enemies who try leashes get counted if you want to remain something other than a ditch. Rufus met us at the gate with horn law and a face that had not slept. He looked at Livia first, then at me, then at the litter. "Gaius?" he asked. "Done," I said. "Under arms. Ritual failed. No leash. Command cut taken. Arrow step dismissed to make room. Level 23, still bleeding." Rufus exhaled once through his nose. "Then the southern knife is broken at the handle. The blade pieces remain. Blade pieces get rope, terms, or the road south without standards," I said. "Not a harvest." Livia went straight to the eave desk with raw wrists and refused a stool until the captured seals were laid out in order. 3 cousin hands, 2 forged treasury marks, 1 ritual instruction that will make priests pretend they never learned to read. I will copy everything before anyone loses a tablet for comfort. "Copy," Rufus said. "Then we send truth toward every road post Gaius poisoned." Secundus intercepted the prisoner column with the custody book like a shield wall made of ink. Northern sealed remain sealed, 56. 3 temporary raiders separate. Odo and Beran treatment separate. Red Day field bonds outside main register. Night host bonds still temporary. Latin civil captives enter a new separate register. No mergers, no shared pens, no clever simplifications. Named dead from the judgment rise and the seam and the wedges will be listed as Latin hostiles under arms, not as northern trophies. "Do it exactly," I said. "If I ever order a merger for convenience, refuse me and call Rufus." Secundus's mouth twitched. "I would refuse you anyway." Sava finally caught me and made the stool a law. Chest, forearm, thigh, shin, eye strip checked and rebuilt. "You are a maintenance problem," she said. "I am aware." "Command cut," she said, tasting the words without knowing the system's edge. "If that means you start throwing men like stones, I will drug your water. It means a pattern I will drill carefully or not use," I said. "Novice. Warning included. I am not hungry to hear allied ranks scream because I wanted a pretty break." Tiro stood the signum at full height when the fort could see it. No cheer ordered. A few throats tried anyway. I cut the cheer with a raised hand. "Hold the sound. We lost Romans too. Save noise for work." Capito walked 10 steps without a chair and stopped before pride could drop him. "General," he said, testing the word. "Not a title from a city," I said. "Title from a function," Capito replied. "Functions feed men, cities catch up or choke." Navius, pale but upright, brought the right century's count without embroidery. Hanno reported ferry pins cold and true, chain tick honest. Helvius wanted new stakes for the insulted seam, also wanted a drink and a nap and a promise that reverse stake nights would not become a hobby. I promised nothing about hobbies. I assigned the stakes. I called the officers and the remaining polished captive senior living Optio into the yard where everyone could hear. The Optio expected execution theatre. I gave him terms. "Your tribune tried to hang a Roman desk and leash a soldier with bowls," I said. "He died for the attempt under arms. You living will not die for his ambition if you take this. Stack weapons under count. Accept temporary bond or walk south unarmed on the cart road by second bread. Carry word that the rebel brand is contested by Rufus's fort, by witness tablets, and by the failure of Gaius's seals. If you return under arms against this fort while Armin's host still threatens the river, you will be met as hostiles. If you return to face the north under honest command, you will not be hunted for having been wrong in fear." The Optio swallowed. "And the ones who want to swear to your cloth?" Rufus answered before I could make the cloth into a personal cult. "Swear to the fort's horn law and the field command as I set it, not to a man's glow. Glow is a tool, law is a wall." I nodded. What he said. Some chose the road south unarmed. Some chose temporary bond. A handful asked to stand in our intervals after a trial period under watch. I allowed the request as labor and drill first, weapons later, names recorded twice. Trust is a stake line. You build it in rows. Then Rufus did the thing cities hate because it happens without them. He stood on the mound steps and spoke hard and short. Temporary operational command in the field is no longer a patch over missing officers alone. Lucius Varro holds general command of the loyal forces answering this fort and its river chain, under my fort law and under the civil rule he has kept when others wanted spectacle. Capito and Navius remain his senior lane voices as flesh allows. Livia Aureliana holds civil tablets and supply challenge with authority to stop orders that smell like Gaius. Tiro holds the signum. Hanno holds fairy life and death. Secundus holds custody truth. If any man cannot live under that structure, he leaves unarmed and alive today. Silence. Then acceptance in the only currency that matters. Men went to work without forming a second council in the shade. I did not kneel to the moment. I did not raise my gladius for a statue pose. I checked water distribution and the medical line and the separate Latin register until the word general settled into function instead of fever. Livia found me at the eve after the second bread, wrist wraps clean, eyes hotter than fever. You kept the rule on the rise.
Barely, I said. Barely is still a keep. Command cut, she said. I wanted explained without holy fog. I explained as best a farmer could. A captured order pattern, novice, useful for breaking enemy formations, dangerous to your own front if you treat men like hinges. She listened like a person filing a law against future me. You will not use it inside the fort, she said. Agreed. You will not use it on prisoners. Agreed. You will drill it on stakes and willing ranks with red cloth markers before you ever spend it on living wedges. Agreed, I said, and meant it because Cassian's absence had become a standard higher than any panel warning. I opened the panel once more for the day's end inventory, not a celebration, as ledger. Lucius Varro, level 23. Experience 0 of 21,600. Strength 15. Endurance 16, Agility 15, Vitality 15, Intelligence 15, Skill Echoes, Shield Hook, Battle Ready, Boar Brace, Practiced, Command Cut, Novice, Echo Slots, 3 of 3, Civil Faction at the River, Broken in its command head, Bound in its remaining teeth, Denied Massacre, Livia alive, ferry held, fort held, rebel brand contested with seals and witnesses, immediate promise paid. I closed the panel and went to place men where the next hour, always the next hour, would try to unmake them. North still drummed. That drum had not accepted our Latin settlement as cosmology. It had only waited. I drilled command cut at dusk on a stake field with red cloth markers and men who volunteered to be broken safely. Novice knowledge is a rumor in the bones. It suggests a voice cadence, a timing of pressure on a front rank, a way of calling a lane to collapse an enemy hinge by spending your own edge like a wedge. Even in drill, I felt how easily the pattern could turn our first row into meat if I got greedy. I stopped the first full attempt halfway, reset markers, and tried again smaller. Again, Capito croaked from a stool. Smaller still. If it only works as a grand gesture, it is a trap with your mouth on it. We kept it small. Agility 15 made the footwork of the setup cleaner than yesterday's body would have allowed. Endurance 16 let me repeat without turning the drill into a feint. Strength 15 was mostly irrelevant here. This echo was not a rim trick. It was a responsibility trick. After a dozen bounded trials, I called end. Enough. No one carries a novice command pattern into real steel tomorrow, unless the alternative is annihilation. We win the next fights with hook and brace and boring intervals first. Men looked relieved. Relief is information. It means they trusted me enough to fear my new tool. Livia sent copies of Gaius's seals and the ritual scrap east and south with 3 different riders on 3 different lies of route. If one is bought, 2 may still arrive, she said. If all 3 are bought, we are already inside a larger mouth. Assume larger mouths, I said. Keep writing anyway.
Rufus reviewed fort stores with me like two men counting teeth after a fight. Barley low but not dead. Vinegar adequate. Iron for steaks short. Medical thread shorter. We can hold days, not seasons, if the South Road stays half-poisoned, he said. Then we unpoison with presents, I said. Not with massacres on villages that paid Gaius out of fear. A deputation from the nearest granary village arrived at the outer works before full dark, hats in hands, eyes on our Latin bonds, mouths careful. Their clerk had been hanged. They wanted to know if our eagle meant revenge tours. I met them outside the gate with Livia and no victory plume. No revenge tours, I said. We will take testimony. We will not burn your roofs to balance a ledger. If Gaius's men still sit on your grain, we will remove armed men, not farm families. The eldest village voice studied my eye strip and the fresh blood seepage on the forearm wrap. You look like a man who could burn roofs. I look like a man who has burned wagons that fed a host, I said. Roofs are not wagons. Learn the difference, and I will too. Every day I have to. Livia took their names. Secundus took a separate note so military convenience could not eat civilian truth later. The deputation left with water and a copy of the civil rule read aloud once. Reading aloud matters when hanging has taught people that paper is a predator. Night watch rotated. I forced myself to sleep 2 true hours because Endurance 16 is not permission to become a ghost that issues orders. In sleep, I felt Arrow Step's absence as a missing stair. My body reached for a lateral language and found a wall. Dismissal tax. I woke, walked the stair of stakes slowly, and retrained 3 basic offline steps without system help. Ugly, necessary. Echoes are not the only way to move. Tiro found me at the end of that private drill. North scouts want you. Ilias had dust on his tongue again and less patience for soft landings. Armin's scatter is no longer a scatter. East Loop pony strings have joined a trunk road line. Fires in a thicker belt, not toward our fort direct, toward the Italian approach around the long bend, toward the cities that think rivers are other people's problems. Verona Road? I asked. My mouth went dry around my home word. Could become, Ilias said. They are moving like a host that finished watching Romans cut Romans and decided the meat had tenderized inland. Rufus heard the report in silence. Then, if he bypasses us to bite the fat cities, we become a bone behind him. Bones can choke. Bones can also be ignored until the belly is full. We cannot sprint a tired fort across half a province tonight, I said. We can send warning riders with Livia's copies and a military plain speech. Host in motion, south knife broken here, river still held. Do not waste legions on ghost rebels while the boar walks. Do it, Rufus said. I wrote plain speech until my hand cramped, signed with function rather than fantasy titles, and sent riders who knew how to die quiet if caught. Then I walked to Cassian soil because the word Verona had opened a door in my chest that numbers could not close. Home dirt is not safer dirt, I told him. You knew. I am learning in public. The chain ticked, the fort breathed. Latin temporary bonds muttered in their separate dark and were answered by guards who had been told that murdering mutters was a crime. Northern sealed slept under seals. The freed infant made a small sound and was soothed on a marked roof. Ordinary walls maintained under a general's name that still felt like a coat borrowed from a larger man. I checked the panel once before forcing more sleep. Level 23. Experience empty against 21,600. Strength 15. Endurance 16. Agility 15. Vitality 15. Intelligence 15. Hook battle ready. Brace practiced. Command cut novice. Arrow step gone into dismissal nausea and private ugly relearning. Slots full. Wounds open. Gaius dead. Livia alive. Civil faction here defeated in its command. Armin's host choosing a wider map. Immediate work held. larger war turning its head inland. Before the sleep I forced, I walked the Latin separate register with Secundus and made sure no night guard had invented a simpler pen. Simpler pens are how civil rules die, while officers dream of clean maps. A bonded optio from Gaius's scatter asked whether level 23 meant I could see loyalty. I told him I could see rope knots and work assignments and that loyalty is proved in daylight intervals, not in purple. He almost looked disappointed. Disappointment is safer than awe. Hanno caught me near the ferry and made me put a hand on the coldest pin. If you march inland, leave men who love this iron more than your name. I will, I said. Names do not float, pins do not forgive neglect. I closed the panel and slept with a scutum within hand reach, not because superstition required it, because the next message would not knock politely. The next message arrived before second watch ended, on a horse that had been killed under a living rider. The rider fell into our outer ditch with an arrow pair in his back and a leather tube still tied to his wrist with the stubbornness of a man who had decided what his last job was. Helvius pulled him out. Sava's pair tried. The rider used the last of his air on 4 words, "Smoke on Verona." Then he went to the place where temporary operational command cannot follow. We opened the tube under lanterns with Rufus, Livia, Tiro, and my blood still seeping into fresh wraps. Inside, a short military hand from a northern Italy post that still believed plain speech mattered. Host under silver bore standards on the Verona approaches. Siege lines beginning. Demands not yet fully voiced. Fires already. Road posts broken. Request any loyal force that is not a rumor. A second scrap hastily added. They ask for the eagle soldier by description. Farmer, glow, eye. My home word stopped being a private door and became a public fire. No one spoke for a full breath. The fort's night noises filled the whole. Chain tick, a mule's complaint, a guard's cough. Ordinary sounds under an unordinary sentence. Rufus spoke first, because forts need first voices. Civil knife here is handled enough to move. Not healed, handled. If Armin sets on Verona while we polish our dead, we become the men who won a cousin fight and lost a country. Livia's finger rested on the scrap that described me without naming me. He is not only conquering, he is fishing with a city as bait. I know, I said. My voice sounded like someone else's endurance. He watched us spend blood on Latin seals. He chose the moment when Rome's eyes are still crossed. Capito, woken and standing with a spear as Cain, spat, then uncrossed them with a march. Navius nodded too hard and grabbed a post. Right sentry can move at dawn. Hanno's jaw worked. Ferry stays held or the river becomes Armin's road around whatever we march. I need men left who understand pins are not decoration. You will have them, I said. We do not strip the chain naked to chase smoke. We march a field force under general command and we leave a fort that still functions. Rufus, I hold the fort, Rufus said. You take the loyal mobile strength that can walk and still arrive as soldiers, not as a funeral. Temporary bonds that can be trusted for labor stay. Hard risks stay sealed or guarded. I will not give you a clean conscience if you empty my walls for a heroic story. I do not want a clean conscience, I said. I want Verona's people not turned into a lesson about my glow. Tiro's hands on the signum were white. We go. We go prepared, I said, not blind, not into eagle breaker bait because a city burns and my pride wants to outrun logistics. I ordered the wake sequence we had drilled for nightmare rather than hope. Water, rations, stake loads, medical threads split between fort and column, custody book rules for what moves and what stays, Latin terms restated so no one cleans up prisoners in our absence. Secundus looked like he might bite anyone who suggested cleanup. Good. Sava packed my wounds as if packing a dam. If you open sight because Verona is home, I am not there to sew your brain back. Keep the strip. Fight men, not purple ghosts. I will keep it shut unless death is the only other door, I said. Death is patient, she said. Be more patient. I walked the burial edge in the dark with 2 fingers on soil. Intervals all the way, I said. If I spend your lesson on a pretty charge into a champion's timing, haunt me. The soil, as ever, offered no bargains. I took the lack of bargains as honesty. Livia met me at the eve with a travel desk already strapped. I am coming. The fort needs your copies. The road needs someone who can stop you from signing stupid power into existence. Because a city screamed, she said. Rufus keeps fort law. I keep you from becoming Gaius with better excuses. Also, Verona's clerks will not listen to only spears. Rufus did not argue her off the column. That was its own order. Before dawn grey, the mobile force stood in intervals that would have made Cassian grunt approval and then call us idiots for being proud of basic competence. I inspected without theatre. Hook ready, brace ready, command cut locked behind teeth. Arrow step still a missing stair I climbed with ugly private footwork. I opened the panel one last time at the gate. Inventory as vow. Lucius Varro, level 23. Experience 0 of 21,600. Strength 15. Endurance 16. Agility 15. Vitality 15. Intelligence 15. Skill echoes. Shield hook battle ready. Boar brace practiced. Command cut novice. Echo slots 3 of 3. Civil eagles had finished their quarrel at this river hard enough to leave a fort standing and a general in more than function. Gaius dead under arms, Livia alive, massacre refused, seals contested, loyal legions, call them what they were, loyal forces with legionary bones, answered a structure instead of a panic. Now the wider map burned. I closed the panel. Tiro lifted cloth. Rufus's horn gave the release pattern that meant the field might leave without the fort dying of the leaving. Hanno slapped the gate timber once as blessing or threat. Capito took a wagon seat rather than pretend his legs were lies he could ignore. Navius walked. Helvius counted stake bundles like beads. South Fringe no longer owned a tribune with bowls. North and East owned a champion with a city in his hands. Move, I said. We moved towards smoke we could not yet see and a home road that had become a siege line, under a sky that did not care whether a farmer had learned command cut or only learned how expensive Latin blood is when it pays a panel. Behind us, the chain kept its iron. Ahead, Verona kept whatever time Armin allowed. Between them, Civil War's local head lay finished, and the season's true spear finally turned fully toward the place where I had once worried about vines, landlords, and weather like any other man who did not yet know how many kinds of eagle can try to eat a life. By full light, the column had found its breath and the road had found its rumors. Refugees met us in ones and threes, then in a thin stream that tried not to look like a stream, because streams get taxed by despair. A woman with a burned hem said she had seen silver boar standards on the ridge that watches the Verona carts. A boy said the city gates still closed at night and still opened for water parties that came back thinner. An old soldier with no unit left said Armin's demand had been shouted once under a truce cloth. Send out the eagle bearer, and the host will discuss the city's breathing. Discuss, as if air were a treaty term. I did not run the column. Running dies in the first heat. Endurance 16 belongs to the march as much as to the brace. We kept intervals, water stops, rear watch, and a ban on looting even abandoned carts until Livia's mark said abandoned truly, rather than paused in terror. At a crossroads shrine, someone had nailed a copy of Gaius's rebel brand beside a crude drawing of a man with a glowing chest. Fresh spit on both, fresh blood on the wood under the nails. The war of tablets had reached places that would never see our river chain. Livia pulled the brand down, replaced it with a witness copy and a short, plain statement. Gaius Septem dead under arms after failed seizure right. Fort and ferry held. Civil rule against helpless killing in force. Host under Armin Seric reported on Verona approaches. Do not pay cousins for safety they cannot sell. She signed. I signed. Rufus's seal, carried for this, stamped. Tiro held cloth while it dried so the wind would not make our truth look like flight. Will it be believed? Navius asked. By some, Livia said. Enough some is how roads stay roads. Near noon, a scout pair returned harder than they left. Not Ilias. Ilias was ranging wider. These two were white around the mouth. We saw the smoke, the older said. Not one fire, a belt, siege lines like a noose that still pretends it might be a necklace, pony screens, boar standards, and a spear taller than the men near it on the far center mound. Amen. Not a guess, a shape the world makes when it wants you to know the season's spear has arrived. I did not open Eagle Sight to confirm a level 27 heart I already believed. The strip stayed on. Flesh ban and choice ban both. If Eagle Breaker waited in that tall spear's timing, it would not find me painting purple on a ridge for free. Distance, I asked. If we march without sleep, we arrive as meat tomorrow evening, the scout said. If we march like soldiers, 2 dawns and we arrive able to stand. Soldiers, I said. Send a fresh rider pair around the long east loop with warning only. No hero delivery into the Noose. Fort rear remains Rufus. We are the mobile answer, not the only answer. Command cut itched in my mouth like a language wanting practice on real hinges. I left it unused. A noose is not a drill field. Novice patterns do not get first vote over hook, brace, terrain, and Livia's supply brain. Tiro walked beside me for a stretch in silence. Then, when we get there, if he asks for you by name, he will not get a gift of me, I said. Cities are not coin purses for champions. We will break his hunger with walls, food, signals, and hard edges. If I have to meet him, I meet him with a plan that is not his. Cassian would say stop talking and check the rear, Tiro said. I checked the rear. Cassian still won. Toward afternoon, the smoke became a smudge even tired eyes could own. Not close, real. The color of a home region breathing wrong. Men from northern Italy in our ranks went quiet in a way that was not cowardice. Quiet recognition. I was one of them. Tenant dirt does not leave the body just because a panel learned your name. I called a short halt on a rise that let us see the smudge and the road and each other. No speeches about destiny. Destiny is what Gaius had tried to pour into bowls. Look, I said, that is the work after the work we finished. Civil eagles at the river kept their rule and killed a leash. Good. It bought us the right to arrive as something other than a rumor. Ahead is Armin Seric, and a city that includes people who do not care what level I am. We will not spend them to make my fear simpler. We will not open sight because home makes us stupid. We will not invent massacres to feed a panel that already climbed on Latin blood this week. We will arrive, see clearly with human eyes, and hold what can be held. A murmur of agreement, not a cheer, better. Livia stood at my shoulder, travel desk scarred, wrists wrapped, eyes on the smudge. When this is over, you will still need laws. When this is over, you will still be there to throw them at my head, I said. Yes, she said, and that yes was a kind of marriage to the work, if not yet to the man. I touched the scutum edge, felt the split rim's remaining honesty, and thought of a cane in soil by a chain that still ticked without us. General of Loyal Forces, level 23, command cut novice locked behind teeth, arrow step dismissed and partially relearned as plain footwork. Gaius gone, rebel brand contested, fort behind, Verona ahead under siege. The immediate civil promise had been paid in full before we took this road. That mattered. Pay promises before you spend men on the next fire, or the fires teach you to become fuel. Up, I said. Intervals. The column rose, cloth lifted, dust took our ankles. Far smoke waited like a held breath on the edge of my home sky. Armin's host had reached Italy's soft middle before we could rest, and the tall spear on its mound did not need purple numbers to name the next price. We marched toward it anyway, not as rebels written in clean ink, not as a tribune's melted tool, but as a field force that had refused to let civil war become an easy harvest, and as a farmer who still intended to choose what kind of eagle he would be when the boar finally stopped watching and started claiming.